Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's conversation by Inner Expansive Horizons, where we delve into inspiring stories and experiences of others, professional knowledge of others, towards self-empowerment and transformation. If you have watched my videos before, please do like and subscribe to my channel and share it with others to reach a wider audience to help many people. Our guest today is Amanda Widerman. Amanda is a spiritual coach and a certified trauma coach as well. She brings in a holistic approach to healing and personal and spiritual growth. She was an ambulance paramedic for about 13 years and was on the front lines of emergency care, providing essential treatment and support during critical moments. She's also a YouTuber sharing insights on personal transformation, spirituality, and her near-death experience, which transformed her journey in life. Let's hear what Amanda has to share about this transformation that helped her to move her career forward into a different new world of healing and helping others. Hello, Amanda. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you for being here for our viewers. And, I would love, I have shared a little bit of your introduction, but please do share about yourself and your, what was your background before being what you are today?
Sure. Yeah, my name's Amanda. I grew up in Canada, in Toronto area, and I'm 42 years old. And my upbringing was in a middle-class Canadian family, multi-generational Canadian family. We went to Christian church. That was, a big part of our life, going on Sunday and then to other events during the week. So a quite religious family, and I went to this private school. So yeah, that was pretty much the only world that I knew as a young person.
Yeah, so, you have had a beautiful experience, because of which I could find you. Can you share your near-death experience and how it changed your perspective on life and spirituality?
Yes, absolutely. I love talking about this. So when I was 35 years old, I was with a long-term partner, and him and I were driving on a high mountain road in British Columbia. We were living there and on our way home from a camping trip. And he was driving our car, and it was a really skinny road where the mountain went almost like straight up on one side, and on the other side of the road there was a drop off where there's a very small guardrail. And another car lost control that was heading towards us, and it caused us to have to swerve onto the gravel shoulder, and we lost control. Our car started spinning. And we didn't hit that other car, but we hit the next car that was coming our way. We got in the wrong lane. And as soon as we collided with that car, our car flipped upside down and landed wheels up, crushing the roof. And we were teeter-tottering over the edge of the cliff and kind of like stuck on that little guardrail. And when we did open our eyes, all we could see was upside down trees going straight down. So we were really lucky not to go over the edge. And I always mention that I had been working for many years as an ambulance paramedic, and I was very used to that road. And most cars that have a big accident there, they just go over the edge. Very few people do survive. So that was the situation on the road for my car accident. And what happened for me personally changed my life forever. So as soon as we swerved onto the shoulder, I had a split second thought, okay, we're going to die. We're going over the edge. So I don't know how it all happened in an instant, but what I did do was I closed my eyes immediately, and I relaxed my muscles. I leaned back in the seat and I prepared to die. I wanted to go peacefully. And it was just kind of like taking off in a plane. There's nothing you can do. You're going. So I just really surrendered and let go and expected to die. And I don't remember anything about the events of the car accident. I was told these things after the fact, because as soon as I leaned back in my seat and surrendered, I had what now I call an out-of-body experience on that road. It started with this feeling of suddenly not having a heavy body and not being able to see. I know my physical eyes were closed, but my hearing started to go away, like somebody was putting earmuffs on. I had no sight. I couldn't feel like my skin or anything like that. I didn't have the heaviness of a physical body. All of my five senses, my basic senses went away, and I felt as light as a feather. And I've never experienced that before. It sounds really cliche, but there was just no heavy body anymore. But I was also fully me. I was also like, nothing had changed in my awareness, as though I was just fully aware, and I was actually more crisp and clear because I didn't have the dullness of my body. So I had popped out of my body, I guess. I didn't know about these things before. And I'm now experiencing this lightness and being in what I felt and sensed to be almost like a black, dark, soft, feathery, pillowy, womb-like place. So even though I couldn't quite see anything, my physical eyes are closed, and even in my awareness, I can't really make out. It just seemed dark and safe, kind of like the safest cave you've ever been in. And the first thing that I kind of like just sensed was this huge relief. It was like all kinds of my earth difficult feelings of tension or anxiety, worry, all of the little things that we all carry around, they were just gone in an instant. It was like I had left them behind, and they belonged in the physical body only. And where I had popped out of into this new realm, it wasn't a place where you could bring those things. And so there was me without all that stuff that had bothered me for my whole life. And the next thing that I noticed was it felt familiar. It felt familiar. I didn't know this invisible realm from my earth life, but I felt as though I'd known it before, as though I'd passed through here in past lives, maybe coming or going from Earth. I wouldn't describe it as heaven, but as a passing way, a threshold to somewhere else, to other places. And I wasn't alone there. I could sense that I was surrounded by many, many beings. And it's hard to describe because I couldn't actually see them and make them out. But I had things, either humans, healthy ancestors, angels, devas, I don't know. But I was being surrounded by, I was being surrounded by love and beings that knew me very well, from outside of my life as Amanda, maybe from past lives or in between lives. But they seemed to know me and welcome me and remember me. And I seemed to recognize them as beings that really knew me to my core. That knew my intentions, that knew my many lives, seemed to know them. So even though this experience was really happening in Earth time over the course of a couple of seconds, I was experiencing everything that I'm telling you now, almost like a step-by-step thing. And in out of body time, in spiritual time, it seemed like a very long, blessed, blissful time spent in their presence. And there were no conversations had. I wasn't given any like messages to bring back to Earth. It was literally a heart and telepathic connection with beings of a higher level than I had known even existed. And what they shared with me basically was a feeling or a knowing of who they are, who we are, our higher selves on a higher level. And I felt like I could let that just kind of sink in during our time together, and also recognize myself as one of them, knowing, oh, there's a part of me that is also a higher being. And the part of me that has no tension, that has no anxiety, that has no human characteristics that are difficult. And I guess I was just there in spiritual time long enough to let all of this sink in and remember this part of who I am outside of space and time that felt very ancient, felt very ancient. And then the next thing I knew, I opened my eyes and I was looking at upside down trees, and my hearing came back. There was people yelling, and there was sounds of metal crunching and crashing. The car was still moving and settling. And yet and we're still kind of dangling over the edge, but I had never felt better in my entire life. I felt completely blissed out, as though I had just been home. I'd been where I am known and where I've come from and where I will go again. And that gave me, in that moment in the car and after, so much inner security and inner peace and joy of having this part of myself kind of come back to me. These memories and this visit was just so fresh that, the guys let us out of the car and the emergency services came, and, it was a chaotic scene for sure. The car was destroyed, and yet my partner and I were physically safe. He had a concussion and I had a small shoulder injury. It was like we were just held supernaturally from going over the edge.
Yeah.
And yeah, the rest of that day, I was just kind of in this beautiful daze where everybody was wondering, like, oh, there's so much to do. This is so crazy. But what I had experienced and what I had seen never left me. It's been 7 years. Uh, Actually, it was August 17th that happened, which is, we're August 19th. So the anniversary of it was 2 days ago. And it's still as fresh today as it was then. And it did change my life forever.
Yeah, so this helped you to, or was this pivotal? I should say that pivotal is the right word, to, move your career forward to another level. I mean, moving from being a paramedic, serving humanity in a different way, but now this was different, and you evolved from there. So, what would you say to that? What was your emotion behind moving forward?
Yeah. So I immediately took some time off work for my shoulder to heal. And I wasn't planning on getting up and leaving my job. I loved my job. I loved the people I worked with. But when I did go back to work after 4 months, I realized that I had changed a lot based on what had happened. And although I had enjoyed my work, I really felt as though I needed to take some time off and just be with myself, just meditate, wander in nature. This event had really just changed my perception in every way. It was like my eyes had opened up to parts of myself and parts of people in the world around me that I just maybe was in denial about, didn't want to look at. And now it was like my awareness had opened up so that I couldn't look away. And so I started to notice right away, I need to be by myself. I need to spend time alone. And in that first year, my ex and I, my now ex, but he and I had been together for 13 years, and we ended up breaking up in that first year after the accident because we had changed. I left him. I just realized that this relationship was not honoring and not respectful to me as a human being, and I had been in it and just made it work for such a long time. And then my job, I did leave my job as well because I had been in denial about how hard it was on my body to be working night shifts. I was getting some chronic health problems that I just kept managing and hoping for the best. But I started to be really honest with myself and realize that things were not getting better. They were just slowly getting worse over time in the job and in the relationship. And so I left both of those in that first year and did take quite a bit of time off, being really just by myself for the first time in my life. I'd always, been in a relationship or lived at home with my family, and I never imagined being an adult and being single and spending, years. It's been years, um, just really getting to know myself and looking a lot deeper beneath the surface when it comes to the soul. So that's definitely some of the first changes.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's not easy to go through that and to talk about it also. I respect you have shared this. Thank you for that. And what does after this experience and moving forward with your life, what does being spiritual mean to you, after this, in a form of some kind of life that is opening up to something which could be very different, unknown, and what religion has got to do with it? Do you think that being spiritual is being beyond religion? What do you believe could be the key elements for spiritual ascension too through this experience?
This is one of my favorite kind of questions. And I think we could probably talk about this all day.
I know.
First off, I will say that it became really clear to me during the out-of-body experience that where I had the chance to visit was beyond any earthly religious idea, beyond any earthly religious teaching. Um, Even though I had been quite involved in Christianity as a religion growing up, I wasn't practicing at all as an adult. And yet here I was, basically in the arms of the great presence of love, or as much of the supreme being as I could handle at the time. And so looking back at religion, I now see it as a wonderful, in many ways, a wonderful stepping stone, to help people have values and integrity and connect in some way to higher power and all these kinds of things. I also understand the shadow side, the many shadow sides of religions, that have harmed people as well. When it comes to, a near-death experience, out-of-body experience, and how mine has been, I now look at religion as something that is just part of our human development. It's maybe a necessary part of many people's human development, but the supreme reality and the presence of what we call, or who we call God, is beyond any one religion. It's just too much, it's too big to be contained.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what is the purpose of our life on Earth? Why we experience what we are experiencing in this three elemental or five element body? Why do we experience what we do?
Yeah, I love this also. Um, in my own path of meditation and other out-of-body experiences that have happened, I'm always kind of curious about that and wanting to just kind of bring more understanding, because it's so complex and so loaded, but I think it's also really simple. And I see us as parts or fractals or reflections of the Supreme Being, part of the Supreme Being of God, but also um, in a part of our development that is quite separate from the all-knowing, because we're quite limited with a human body. And thinking of it sometimes as, and this is another metaphor, but like being cells, as in the human body in its development at this point, like cells inside a greater body. And that greater body has its own awareness and knowing, that bigger part of God. And yet we're part and we're included and we're never separate, but our understanding is still so small compared to how much there is to experience and understand. And we are blessed and valued and loved parts of that body. So important, each one of us having our place in the universe, in that great body of God. And on a journey of evolution and discovery, and that the awareness of God, that higher awareness that we just don't even quite understand, can look out through our eyes. As big and as powerful and intelligent as the Supreme Being is, a part of the Supreme Being can even live spiritually inside of us and make discoveries that, can only be made by part of God forgetting all the things that are known. So when we come into a human body as a spirit, as a soul, we go through from the spirit world this veil of forgetfulness, this veil of forgetfulness where we forget the things that we've known in between lives. We forget our memories, even from past incarnations. And we come into these bodies where we're very five senses, and we've got to find our way around and learn from older people and try and find the lessons from nature and make so many mistakes and experience often so much pain and loss. And yet, if we can remember a little bit about the truth of being part of God, about being connected, of having the opportunity to reach up and make those connections in our spiritual practice, we can really evolve our soul. And Earth is one of the, opportunities of evolving our soul and knowing ourselves, and then being reunited in one way or another after our life, and being received back to more of a whole, being received more back into that oneness where it is so beautiful and such a relief. So having a purpose here, I think, has a lot to do with exploration and exploring love, because a lot of the time it's like a lack of love that we have for ourselves, a lack of love that other people have for us and nature and all these things. And yet through that pain, if we are evolving, we learn that love really is the only way, because everything else is just so painful. And I do believe that the Supreme Being is made of love, and that as the little parts and the little cells in the body of the Supreme Being, we are learning that often the hard way. But it is an honor to be here, even when it's really painful, because this is where we are going. We're all going to the same place and in the same direction eventually.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's beautifully explained, yeah, going back to love, the source is all full of love, and one has to experience that. And you've had the pleasure of experiencing that. It's beautiful, and you've described it beautifully. So, like in particular, like I'm talking about now girls, women, girls, they go through so many experiences, they're as being small little girls playing, in the neighborhood with dolls, then they grow up, they evolve, they meet different people, and transition into, getting married or getting into relationships. Things happen, they have their work life, and, they move, but there's a lot of I somehow sense there's a lot of feminine pain that is being carried forward in women as a whole. What do you feel? How do you feel about that? And how would you guide young girls or women as a whole? How should they?
Yeah, that's a really big passion of mine. I'm so glad that you brought this up too, because young women, I believe, across the world, no matter where we go, they have big struggles. They have big challenges, from difficult families, dangerous, violent, abusive families that they're born into, or even if their family isn't, cultures that make it unsafe for them, or make it so that They're somehow left behind educationally. There are just barriers in this world for young women. And I did work myself for about 5 years in a group home for women ages 14 to 17 that had significant barriers in life. And I really believe that we need more women who love themselves to really show up in this world, because it's such a rare thing. So if you're watching this and you're a woman who does love themselves and who is on the other side of some of these challenges, you are needed to really speak up, to shine, and to live in a way that is really empowered, because there's so many women who really are looking for a light, a mentor, just a bright light in this world. To young women, if I could go back to myself at 14 or 15 in my teenage years and give myself advice that I wish that I had back then, I don't know if I would have listened, but this is what it would have been, is that you have the option of loving and valuing yourself enough to keep people away who don't have that same level of love and respect for you, even if it means periods of time where you feel lonely, even if it means periods of time where you have to go somewhere new, live with someone else, sign up for a different school, do something different after school, change friends. Even if you have to do what's really hard to respect yourself, I promise you, if you do that and you just have a bit of patience and wait, better people will come along. Better people will come along. You deserve to respect yourself. You deserve the rights to your own body, who touches your body, when that happens. If you say no when you really feel no, to trust that the right relationship will make its way to you, because you're becoming stronger and empowered. You're not going to be alone forever if you say no to the first person. And that it's not always going to be really hard. Being a teenager, being in early 20s is very hard. It can be hard on mental health. It can be hard on self-esteem. It can be lonely if you're not around people who love you. But if you stick in there and you don't give up, and you don't numb yourself out, and you don't give away your precious energy and your precious body to people who don't deserve it, a time will come where the worst is over. For me personally, the worst was 14 to 18. And I struggled with an eating disorder. I struggled with mental health issues. I was on 5 different psychiatric medicines. I had self-harm, where I would cut my arms with a knife. I remember writing suicide letters. And part of all of that horrible time was because I thought I was always going to be a mess. I thought that things were just going to get worse and that this is how life is. And if I had only known that by the time I made it into my 20s and I moved to a different town and I started a different job, and I very slowly made little changes with who I surrounded myself with, I would get off all of the psychiatric medications. I would stop self-harming. I would stop being in bed all day, every day for weeks with depression. That life actually does get better. So if somebody had come and told me that and held my hand metaphorically when I was 14, I would be really grateful. So if anyone is listening to this and they're in a bad place, it's not going to be like that forever. And so don't go down too deep and too far, because it'll just take a little longer to get out of there.
Yeah, thank you so much again. Very precious information. One that it doesn't strike anybody's mind at that age, and they are less responsive also. If somebody was telling them it becomes like it's more one-sided, because I don't know what can help them, something like, we have that process of osmosis, so that they can, take that information inside their, at the soul level, to respond to it in a better way. But I hope, after listening to your experience, and if somebody is watching this, will really be impacted in a positive way to take the right step. This now we are also seeing more and more of, it has been there for years actually, but social media has got so many branches, so many apps, and this has taken over us also, because certain things we need to use to do our work, to do our daily, in my work, I need to use social media for certain things. But this has become more like a menace and eats the minds of people, grown-ups and youth at the same time. And it impacts their emotional health. So, like, what would you say to them? Because at the core, somewhere I feel spiritualism has got a lot to do, because you're feeling weak from inside and you're relying on some external source. So, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm a pretty severe person when it comes to social media. I'm like the strict teacher. I personally don't have Facebook and Instagram. I used to, and I had to deactivate it myself about 5 years ago when I noticed that I was very addicted to looking at it. So first off, I want to say, I think it's just addictive in general. And I think anybody is susceptible to kind of getting sucked into that world and wasting time. The reason that I personally deactivated it was because I was comparing myself and my life and what I looked like to other people. And often other people who had filters and they had even changed the picture. That's not even what they looked like, but it was making me feel terrible about myself. And there was a part of me that knew that's not even what they look like, and their life isn't that great. But there was a part of me that felt horrible when I was looking, and I noticed over time, I can't do this. I know not everybody can deactivate social media. That's not what I advocate. But I do want to say I get it, and it's really tough.
Yeah.
But I would say that if you're somebody who really feels horrible after looking at social media for too long, which is most people, um, to really get serious about your relationship with that, even if it means, leaving your phone at home or putting it on airplane mode while you're out doing something productive. Or when you go to work, I'm turning my phone off and I'll turn it back on at the end of the day, having times of the day where you check it and and it sounds really hard because it really is hard. That's how I started doing it. I didn't deactivate everything all at once. I started not using it at work, and then I started having it on airplane mode for 1 hour at a time, which turned into 2 hours at a time. And I will say that with a bit of separation and a little bit of myself with that routine, I started to not miss it as much. At first, I really missed it like an addict, and I craved it. And then I started to notice that I was missing it less and less and less. So I think that any movement towards lessening your use and having kind of times that you go on and times that you don't is going to be better than nothing. So I would say start there. And just always know that, what you're looking at probably isn't real, And maybe many things that you've posted as well probably aren't fully real. So it's a fake place. And what really matters is human to human interactions that are unfiltered, that are loving, where you can feel somebody's presence and energy in an authentic way, and try and fill as much as your time as possible with those things.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing. It's very important. Social media is not my addiction, but I have to use it for my work. But I was also working with, women and young girls. where I have personally spoken with mothers who had this, concern, and then the counselors would talk about um, electronic devices. There's an addiction to that, and that treatment has to be done. I feel at the end of the day, coming to you because I'm talking to you, I feel your inner core and your advice, taken rightly, should matter. It's not about taking medication for electronic addiction. That's ridiculous. But people are doing that, because it does take over your lives as an addiction, as any other substance. So yeah.
Wow. Okay. I didn't know that about, thank you for sharing that with me. I did
Yeah,
not
yes,
realize that.
the counselors were doing that, and when I spoke to these mothers and referred them to some counselors, this is what they came back, some addiction, medication, something like that. So
Wow.
it was interesting. And so what advice would you have for someone, like who is stuck or stagnant in their regular, whatever activity they are doing, they're stuck. My work is not moving forward. My family life is like that. I am in hell. Like, and even spiritual development, spiritual space is huge. And because of all these, I will give you my experience as being coming from a culture where we tend to talk to astrologers and faith healers, and we might talk to other spiritual people as well who will say, okay, do this mantra, and it'll be okay, you'll be fine. So what have you got to say to that?
Yeah. Well, I'm a little bit more extreme again. Um, there's two ways that have worked for me. I'll only say what has worked for me. Um, the first one is taking a big risk. So usually all people are, I think that if we're honest with ourselves, there's always something that's our edge. A friendship that we know is just someone's not honoring our boundaries, but we just kind of put up with it and we kind of tiptoe around it. Or a job that is just not in alignment with our values, but we're not really taking any steps to look for a new one. Or, you know, our diet is really terrible, but maybe we'll start a new one tomorrow. Like, we're all having an edge of something, and we're procrastinating doing something risky or uncomfortable. And sometimes it's a matter of, I'm going to book that course. I'm going to book that flight. I'm going to have that difficult conversation. I'm going to quit that X, Y, or Z. Um, because that can really shake things up in the energetic field, I've found. And it's like a domino effect. It's like you're sending a message to the higher power or the universe, whatever. Um, okay, I realize I'm stuck and I'm going to make this move, but I don't have it all figured out. So can you come in and fill in the rest? And so it's almost like just by tipping that domino, you are starting a process. And I've had so many times in my life where I felt really stuck, and I go and I do that thing that I didn't want to do. And it became just like a butterfly effect, and so many other things shifted. I'll give you just a quick example. There's a sadhana, the spiritual practice that I had done a long time ago. And I always kind of thought, oh, I want to do that again sometime, but I want to have the right time and space. And I want to make sure I'm able to schedule myself in. And I finally was so stuck that I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. I called my spiritual teacher and made this commitment. And it was a semi-fasting practice. Long story short, I was in it for 4 weeks. And during that time, I was eating a bit less and I was following the procedure. And I started to get all of these ideas, very spontaneous ideas. Okay, this is where I'm going to travel to next. This is the art that I'm going to create. This is a conversation I need to have with my boss about lessening my hours so that, for my health reasons. I started just getting like, this is what I'm going to do. And it wasn't frightening. It was just like, it was just all right in front of me, but I had to make that choice to go and do my spiritual practice, which is not a comfortable one, and it was going to be inconvenient, but I just kind of knew it was my edge at the time. So I would say whatever your edge is that you're not saying yes to, but you just need to do it. You just need to say, yeah, I'm making that call. And then on the other side of it, which is kind of the opposite, sometimes it's not a matter of doing something or pushing yourself to an uncomfortable, risky thing. It's actually a matter of surrendering. And so for people, which I find myself in this too, somebody, for example, who puts a lot of pressure on themselves and is always trying to be a perfectionist and be perfect in a certain area. And it's just kind of like, but you're kind of stuck on that hamster wheel and it just keeps on going and you're draining yourself. Sometimes we actually have to do the opposite and really surrender and say, you know what, I'm not going to be doing that anymore. In fact, I'm going to call in sick tomorrow and take a mental health day. And I'm going to do the opposite of all of that work that I've been pressuring myself to do. Because sometimes surrender is actually our edge, and we have to really let go of something that we're attached to, an idea of ourself and how it should be done. So between taking a step into your edge and taking a risk, or surrendering and really letting go of an attachment, I find that those are all things that are very personal to each person, but we kind of all know what it is we should be doing.
Yeah, so how was your experience with, plant medicine? Are you still working with it, or what? I don't know much about it, but I know it's a whole different world and people are talking about it, whether they are using it in a positive, optimistic way, or is it being misused or abused, whatever. But could you share some of your insights?
Yes, I would love to. So I was introduced to plant medicine for the first time at age 36. I was not somebody who was ever much of a drinker or a drug user, not interested in plant medicine. And then after my near-death experience, I watched a documentary about the plant medicine ayahuasca that's grown in the Amazon. And I don't know what it was. It wasn't even anything specific in the documentary, but the idea of it was just like a full yes. There was something in me that said, you know what? If I go to one of these ceremonies, it's going to help me make sense. It's going to bring me to the next step. There's something there for me. And there was the other part of me that I thought, this is crazy. This is what crazy hippies do. This is not me. So I just kind of put it on the back burner, but I had kind of had an internal agreement that this is something I was interested in. And within a couple of months, I went to just a traditional meditation retreat. And the woman that was facilitating that retreat also worked part-time assisting a woman who ran ayahuasca ceremonies on that same property. And so it just happened that I met the right people at the right time. And again, I was just kind of getting chills, like, okay, this is happening. So from there, I went to a lot of ceremonies with ayahuasca between 2018 and 2020. And it was not something I was planning on doing. Many plant medicines like ayahuasca and psilocybin, they're not the kind of substances that are addictive. Instead of numbing, instead of them making you feel happy and numb, they do the opposite. They're like ripping a Band-Aid off. So what they'll generally do for people is if you've got a small issue in your life and you go to a plant medicine ceremony that's run properly, you will come face to face with that, and it will become, that issue of your life will become so psychologically and emotionally uncomfortable in that ceremony that by the time the ceremony is over, you are unbelievably motivated to go make a change in your life. So that's exactly what happened with me. To give you an example, one of my first ayahuasca ceremonies, I was face to face with a lot of childhood experiences that I had completely forgotten about. And I started to see how my relationship with my mother, although, I thought it was fine at the time, and I tried to make the best of it as an adult, I could see extremely clearly in the visions, the power dynamic and the ways that I was being used as kind of like a little doll to be dressed up. And if I wasn't pleasing, and if I didn't get the correct grades, and if I didn't look the part, then I was rejected. And so I didn't realize that there was this whole painful situation very deep, deep down. But obviously, it's always been there. It had always been there. And I was being confronted with the pain of it that I had suppressed. And so in the process after, if it's done properly, there are integration meetings, integration circles where, you talk about your experience and you make sense of it, and you learn how to move the feelings, move the energy through so that you have empowerment and freedom, and you're not finding, for myself, I was finding myself in more relationships, friendships, where I was in the same dynamic, the unhealthy dynamic that I had had with my mother. I was just repeating it in my adult years. So what plant medicine did for me was it put a full stop to any manipulative or toxic adult relationships that I had recreated just because I was used to them. And it got so big, so loud, and so ugly that I had to make a change in my own sovereignty and my own boundaries. And so that took me on a journey with boundaries and personal sovereignty, which wasn't easy. So that's a very little bit about my journey with plant medicine. I will say that it's not for everybody. Usually people intuitively know, okay, that's for me. I really think that there's something I need to figure out that I can't quite place my finger on. It's not something to go do out of curiosity or fun, because you just never know what's going to kind of get ripped open on that Band-Aid. And that there are a lot of people, I believe, with the popularity of plant medicines that are creating retreats and ceremonies that are not held in a safe, an emotionally safe, a spiritually safe container. From my teachers, I've always been taught that it can take, 10, 15, 20 years for someone to apprentice with a master plant medicine shaman before they're really endorsed by that person to have the ability, the knowledge, the relationship with the spirits to hold that plant medicine ceremony. Because it's not just about holding a ceremony with, say, ayahuasca. It's really about knowing how to work with all the different energies that can be purging and clearing out of people in a ceremony, how to alchemize them, and how to clear the space, make other people feel safe. There's just so much going on that I think doesn't meet the eye. So if someone is planning on using plant medicines, to really take their time and find out how long the person has been doing that work and how long did they apprentice, and maybe talking to a few different ones and just finding which one feels the safest. I think it's a very delicate process and nothing that should ever be rushed.
Yes, I appreciate you again sharing the details and, like your experience. I agree, one person needs to be trained, and that experience, number of years and number of, I don't know what to say, number of people the person treated or helped with makes all the difference. Just being informed, doesn't help. Like same thing as a doctor, the doctor needs to be trained and needs to have served a certain number of people before he's truly a doctor, otherwise technically he does have that title of a doctor, but the experience makes all the difference. Yeah, so you're also an artist, like I had a sneak peek into your website and I saw your artwork that, I was drawn to it, and I know that it was spiritually, you had some connection with it and something helped you to create that. Is it something like channeling, or what is it, and how you were drawn to it, creating these art pieces?
Yeah, well, it does tie into the plant medicines. And one other thing, actually, with plant medicine is I do recommend anybody who ever goes to use that. It's not a must, but it's a really big recommendation, is to find yourself a psychedelic plant medicine integration coach. or therapist who is really well versed in that for after the fact, or at least have the phone number of somebody, because a lot of times people will go to the ceremony and be very confused and lost after, and then not know who to talk to. So yeah, I just wanted to add that in there. And
Yeah.
with the art, yeah, most of my art was created after a plant medicine ceremony or after a sadhana or spiritual practice with the plants. So I don't usually go to ceremonies too much now. I now do a practice which is called Master Plant Dieta. And it's a practice that I do with a shaman. And basically, we choose a plant that is non-psychoactive. For example, lavender. Lavender tea is one of them. There's many plants that have spiritual attributes that are very subtle, very subtle. And so we follow a very strict diet for a minimum of 2 weeks, sometimes up to a few months, that has, no onion, no garlic, kind of like a yogic diet, but even more strict. And every day drink the tea of a very specific plant. And what happens over the weeks is you go into a little bit more of an altered mental status, a little bit more of a dreamy fasting mode, and receive many dreams. And in your meditations, often that the spirit of that plant will visit and teach things and do healing on the body. And one wonderful thing is the dreams do usually open up to be much, much more vivid than regular life. And so most of my paintings came from being in Dieta and being inspired by the dreams and the things that I would see. And I always recommend Dieta for people who maybe don't want to go to a psychedelic ceremony and get blasted open like that, but who can commit to a semi-fasting practice because it's more subtle, but it's also powerful. And these kind of non-psychoactive plants like lavender and rose, they each have very specific medicines for the body. So lavender works on the nervous system and rose works on the heart chakra. And there's kind of a subtle plant for every problem. So that's where most of my art has come from.
Yeah, so in a way, it's something, it can be related to channeling or not?
I would say, yeah, I would say that it is like channeling the plant spirit and bringing into this reality something that it wants to share. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you. You've shared so much of information. And I hope people who are watching this, they feel inspired and they feel inspired to take the right steps and move forward to empower themselves with their own self-knowledge. So what would you say, about self-empowerment? Is it something like self-realization, or is it comparable to willpower? Or it's spiritual strength? What is it? What is this resilience about?
Yeah, I think self-empowerment definitely comes into the will. I think humans are funny. We can sometimes be very much with the will and the logic and the brain, and we're like powering through things, but our heart is closed, or our heart is like very open and we're very sensitive, but we just kind of lack that will to really stand in our power. And I do believe that no matter which side we lean towards, our end goal is to bring them both into balance and into coherence. So the first thing in self-empowerment is knowing kind of like which side do you err on, and then you know what you need more of. And so with self-empowerment, often it's the people who are on the more like the water element, more like the heart path. They're big feelers, but we have a little bit more difficulty standing in our center, and we need a little bit more of that masculine side. So with self-empowerment, yeah, I think we do need to develop our will. And I mean, starting small is the greatest place to start, even developing on our will and doing, 5 minutes of meditation a day. If we don't meditate, there's something with setting aside 5 minutes to meditate or to contemplate be silent every day that starts to work with the will. And then we see after a little bit of time passes, okay, I've done that one thing every day, that routine, my will is developing. And it doesn't seem like it is, but it is, because you start to notice other areas in life where you become non-negotiable, where you have that will that's, you don't even have to enforce it or push or, yell at anybody. It's just in you, it's integrated into your field. And so that's why I believe spiritual practice like meditation or yoga or prayer, something that you do every day, really starts to strengthen the energetic field around you, so that when you do need to empower yourself, when you do get into a difficult situation and you have to suddenly use your voice, you're more prepared because you're more grounded and you're more centered from that practice. And I think self-empowerment, especially for women, especially for people who are really laid back and gentle, that can be one of the biggest edges of our entire life, almost like an entire life journey of sovereignty. And that's really one of the biggest initiations of our time, I think, is self-sovereignty. It's never against anybody else, never about dominating another person. It's about being able to just stand in our field without anyone tipping us over and trying to use us by manipulating or controlling us for their will. Just being able to avoid that happening is plenty for one lifetime. So yeah, I just starting with a very basic spiritual practice that we do every day to develop our will, and then starting to use our voice in little ways, saying no if you're tired. Someone wants to invite you somewhere, you really don't want to go, but you just say yes. Well, you start saying, no, I'm tired, or I'll think about it. And these tiny little changes over time start to create a whole new person. You look at yourself 1 year later and think, oh my goodness, I was never this self-empowered a year ago, but all those little decisions over and over created a new version of me.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you again. And what are the services, how do you help people? There are quite a few things I was reading, and there are quite a few things areas where you help people with, and how do you work with them?
Yeah. So I do coaching. I'm not a therapist or a counselor. I coach people when it comes to spiritual development, as well as, learning how to use boundaries, learning how to recover from being a people pleaser, learning how to step out of toxic or manipulative relationships, even when that feels really frightening. So what we do in our appointments, it's really all about the person. I love to hear your story. I love to hear where you've been, where you're at now, what's your edge, what's the hardest thing you're struggling with at the moment. And then a lot of the appointment is really just a lot of sharing. And then I am an intuitive, so often I'll get little messages while a person's speaking on something that is like really important and they might not even realize it. Sometimes they actually answer their own question or answer their own problem as they're sharing. And so when I hear them answering their own question, sometimes I'll write it down to share after, because they're not even realizing that the answer is inside of them, which is what I believe is true. And then often, almost always, we do a guided meditation or a guided visualization with one of the elements. I mean, we're in the summer right now recording this, so I've been using fire, working with the element fire this summer to call it in to help burn up anything that's in the field that the people are ready to let go of. And working with the candle, sometimes doing a shamanic journey to meet your inner child or to meet a spirit animal that can help support getting someone to the next step where they want to get to. So yeah, that's what we do.
So you help people with, who are on the spiritual path to understand where they are in spiritual ascension. Are you able to figure out where they are and what they may need?
Yeah. Usually people don't realize where they're at. They often will have an issue, or they feel like they're stuck, or they're all over the place. But as they're talking, I can really hear what they're not seeing that is their magic. And so once we kind of identify what that is, it's a great starting point. And it's very empowering because sometimes we just don't see our own magic and our own gifts until someone was, have you seen that? You know? Yeah.
Yeah. So if, how can people reach you? How can a seeker reach you, contact you?
Yeah, I have a website, lionspiritcoaching.com, and you can email me from the website and we can go from there. Yeah.
Yeah, I will definitely provide your information, below the video and on our website too. So it was lovely talking to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my
I-
pleasure.
I've learned so much from you. Thank
Aw,
you.
thank you.
And so much of information, too much to take it all together, and maybe another talk sometimes, on one particular aspect. It's very useful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.